Hello, hello. It's Tuesday at noon. It's me again. Today I'm going to be talking with Lauren. As some of you might know her, she is someone who I'm collaborating with in addition to Allison Pighetti and Simran Malhotra. Oh, you're already here. Amazing. Let's see.
Good morning, Kristen.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great. How's it going?
Good. I was just going to do a quick little intro, but now I'm going to let you do it. Um, I think I know who you are. I've been following along for a while. I'm learning so much from you, but I would love for you to introduce yourself because most of the people that we have had on Instagram Live and that we feature pretty regularly have a relationship specifically to breast cancer or BRCA or a mutation that is more like well known within the breast cancer community. So would you mind sharing a little bit about your story?
Yeah, and I really want to say thank you so much, Kristen, for letting me come on here and share. I don't have a BRCA mutation. I have a different genetic mutation, and it's not specific to breast cancer. It's actually specific to a whole host of other cancers, but it's called Lynch syndrome. And the reason why I really appreciate you letting me come on here is because Lynch syndrome is not uncommon. It's very common, and it's just very not well known, unfortunately. So the more we can kind of raise awareness, I think the better we all are, for our community, because now we have this understanding that something else out there exists and we can potentially help share the information. And so, yeah, it's just been an incredible journey sharing in, the sisterhood of just hereditary cancer in general. And that's why I'm so grateful to be here talking to you today.
Yeah, you too. I think I am new to knowing about Lynch syndrome, mostly from you, and have learned it really is so common. And I think there are people who just don't know to ask, or we're like the first generation of young women who can get access to that information. I think before it was like, oh, my this person or that person had this kind of cancer or that kind of cancer, and it just was sort of like shrug, you don't know what to do about it. So
Yeah.
can you tell us, when did you learn about Lynch syndrome?
Yeah. And you bring up such a good point too, is, we're all just kind of learning for the first time together. But so I first learned about Lynch syndrome when my mother was diagnosed with colon cancer for the second time, at 56. She was first diagnosed in her early 30s, but no mention of Lynch syndrome back then. It wasn't, even a thing at all. And so the second time around, it was recommended that she get genetic testing, thankfully. And she did, and she was in the later stages of, her cancer treatment at that point. Things weren't looking great. She was resisting chemotherapy, which is another telltale sign of, a genetic predisposition. And so she tested positive for Lynch. And, I think in terms of going through the whole experience of watching her, really having a bad time with chemotherapy, and then ultimately she passed away. I was 25 at the time. I didn't know if I wanted to get genetic testing and even know if I had it. But offspring has a 50-50 chance of inheriting the mutation. So, ultimately I knew that knowing is better than not. And so I went ahead and got genetic testing and I found out that I have it. So that brought with it a whole lot of scary statistics. Like, I will, the likelihood of me getting cancer by the age of 50 is like 85%. And so like these percentages and stuff change, very minimally over the years as they learn more information about the statistics. But that was the statistic I was given. And at 25, I mean, that just kind of feels like, wow, how do I process that information? Like I just saw my mother pass away from it, and now I have to kind of wrap my mind around this, very real likelihood that I'm at some point in my life going to develop cancer, which sounds really scary.
Yeah, it's so scary. And I think the decision to have testing is a really difficult one. And I think it gets thrown around like really cavalierly by people in the cancer community and outside of it. Like, oh, we'll just get tested and just find out. And it's like, well, what are you going to do with that information? And knowing when to get tested and what it means for life insurance. Like, there's so many implications from family making to, you know, every single part of your life gets touched by that information, including like, you know, what you've dedicated your time and your life to now, like what you eat and how you live in a way that is healthy and happy and helps you prevent becoming one of those statistics. And, you know, I hope this doesn't sound cheesy, but like as someone who also doesn't have a mother, I'm like very proud of you that you've taken
Oh,
something that is really difficult and turned it into education and helping other people. It's not easy. It's not an easy choice. And I think, you know, we're putting ourselves out there. There's lots of women putting themselves out there who don't hear that, who don't have that person, who don't have parents who are cheerleading them. And it's really hard. And I know how hard it is. And thank you. And, you know, from the bottom of my heart, I think you're doing such good work. Hi,
well,
Simran.
that, hey, Simran, that's, yeah, that's very meaningful to me. And I think these are the kinds of connections that like I crave because like you know, and you're on social media too. Like you don't always hear the positive feedback. You know that you're trying to make an impact. You know that, you know, you're trying to make a difference and do good, but you don't always get that direct feedback. So to hear it, it's really meaningful to me. So I appreciate that so much, Kristen.
Yeah, of
And
course.
yeah, I think you touched on some interesting things too. I mean, yeah, I am trying to figure out the lifestyle piece. Like that's what I've just been really curious about the most. So, trying to figure out like how we can eat better, exercise, sleep, all of it, you know, and even the mental health aspect, like you're talking about, that's where I saw probably the biggest gap was okay, I was now handed this information of my statistics, but I really wasn't given anything more than that. And I know people's experiences with genetic counseling vary a lot. Some people
Yeah.
have phenomenal experiences, and some people, you know, not so great.
Yeah, Lauren, I don't know if you can also see the chat, but Bree, hi Bree, is asking about how quickly you get test results. And I don't know that I can speak super well to that. I had my testing in 2008 after my son was born, which was like 5 years after my mom died. I finally was like, okay, I should understand and know about what my risk is and talk to somebody. And at the time, they were only testing for BRCA. So, you know, I think it's completely evolved in the last 12 years. And I'm wondering, can you answer that question? Like, how long does it take? It's easy to find a genetic counselor, Bree, or
Yeah.
anyone else listening. Um, and also, are the results ever wrong? I'm going to let Lauren talk in 1 second. Bree, yes, my results of being BRCA negative, I need to get tested again. It could be wrong. Like the tests evolve.
Wow.
And certainly in the last 10 to 12 years, it's a completely different thing. They can screen for so much more. They're going to know more probably every year for our lifetime. I don't know how often they recommend getting tested. If you get tested, like I've been told I need to get tested again. I don't know if you get tested today. Should you get tested again in 5 years? Do you know anything about that, Lauren?
For Lynch syndrome, I think it's more rare to have a false positive. I know you can get the test results in probably about 2 weeks. That's what I hear, but I also got tested nearly a decade ago. So, I mean, I'm just sort of hearing from other folks that, you know, it's a 2 week turnaround time. I think mine was pretty similar, but that's fascinating, Kristen. I did not know that about BRCA because you're making huge decisions about your body. You're making huge decisions about prevention. And
Well, I
if
think
in fact
you can get a false
yeah,
negative, not a false positive. And Simran is
okay.
answering, and Bree, Simran is a doctor. She's one of the people Lauren and I are collaborating with on a nutrition event series. She says that getting tested every 5 years because of advancements, and I think that's probably right. You know,
Okay.
they the research. I live near Boston, and so when we were allowed to go places, I would try to go and listen when there was like discussions and panel events on genetics and cancer treatment. And it's also just like our level of understanding, and maybe this is something we can speak to Simran about live at some point in the future, but it's evolving so fast. So it sounds
Yeah.
like with Lynch syndrome, you're not going to get a false positive. Do you know, well, and neither one of us are genetic counselors. We should probably just
Yeah.
wait for experts. But I think it's like between 2 weeks. I had to wait a month, but I bet you're right that it's closer to 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I've never been asked that before. And I've spoken with genetic counselors. I do try and maintain good relationships with genetic counselors. And if you guys can seek out genetic counselors here on social media. They can be super helpful. I know a lot of them are just really itching to share their knowledge because they're afraid of misinformation getting out there on socials. So contacting them directly is a great way to get, kind of like, you don't have to make an appointment necessarily, but you can kind of like get some like quick just information. Dina DNA is a great one. I follow her. I did a talk with her several weeks ago, and she is incredibly, quick to get back to you and willing to help. So,
yeah, actually, this is
yeah,
such a good segue because I think social media is such an easy way to be well-intentioned and disseminate confusing information. And that's one of the reasons that we decided to do this event series, which is on nutrition and cancer prevention, excuse me. Because as someone who wants to eat well and thinks about nutrition, but doesn't know much about it, it's so hard. There's so many fad diets. There's so much information. There's people who are really passionate and believe in what they're doing. And I think, like we're leaning on you and Allison and Simran to really be experts and share real information. And that's sometimes hard to find. So I'm excited to start that. It's this Friday at noon.
yeah, yeah, I am too. And, I think social media is such a double-edged sword. And for me, it was hugely impactful and helpful for my mental health. And that's what I will say. Like, going from a place of feeling like, okay, there's no one in my family that has Lynch syndrome except my mom who passed away. Okay, scary. I can't talk to my family about this stuff. I can't talk to my friends about this stuff because they have no idea what it is. And a lot of my doctors I'm educating, which is fine. We're all learning about this stuff. It's a new kind of frontier, but it feels very scary because you think I'm the only one. This is very isolating. And then you log on to Instagram and you find, dozens of other people like you. And for BRCA, thousands of people. And it's really incredible because then you shift your mindset from it's only me to, wow, okay, them too. And I'm not all alone. And this isn't so scary because people have been through worse than me and they've gotten through it. But then there's the other side, like you mentioned, where you do have to be careful with misinformation. And, as you broaden your reach and you talk to more folks, it's easier to kind of get, information that's not exactly accurate, which, yeah, it happens a lot. And I think you have to learn to really be your own healthcare advocate and really do your homework. And unfortunately for us, we have to do a lot of homework because sometimes our doctors don't even know what's best for us. And yeah, it's really interesting. Like you have to do a lot of work to take care of yourself.
Yeah, it feels like a full-time job. I know that
Yes.
it's a completely different, annoying thing to live as a previvor in all of the ways that means, whether you know what your hereditary risk is or not. If you're someone who has cancer in your family that you know about, it's doctor's appointments, it's reading, it's educating yourself, it's trying to find people to connect with so you don't feel isolated and alone, which is, what you just spoke to. And if you're someone who has cancer, you have this maintenance plan for the rest of your life. Like it's such a huge part of how we live in our identity. And I think, my hope with social media is that we can sort of all figure out together how to live well and be happy and be our multifaceted selves and not just define ourselves by disease. And it's really hard. And I think, you know, I was thinking this morning about food and nutrition and was excited to talk to you, and how difficult that is to like, one, get the information and then make life changes and implement it in time. Like when we're busy, when we're tired, when we're stressed, we fall into like bad habits or what's convenient. And so I think, you know, I feel like the information that you put out and why I'm so excited about you and what you're doing is it's really helpful and actionable and easy to understand and figure out like, okay, here's a great recipe, I'm going to try it. And it's not 200 ingredients. It feels really approachable.
Yeah. You know, one of the biggest blessings that, you know, I feel like I've received is I've had the opportunity to work for exceptional people. So I lived out in Boston, Cambridge actually, for several years. I was working for the Angiogenesis Foundation, and I found them through a nutrition, it was like a TED Talk on nutrition, which the president of the foundation had done. And I just reached out to them randomly and I said, I wrote them a long letter. I said, I love what you're doing with nutrition. I've never heard doctors talk about food and nutrition this way. And they asked me to come interview for them. And I was able to go work for, you know, one of the top cancer research food institutions in the world. You know, at that time they were growing and working with, you know, a ton of doctors and scientists and professional chefs to figure out how can we make the food science into something that's delicious and palatable. But what that experience taught me was how to do research, because I was predominantly working on translating medical literature into recipes. At that time, I was already a certified natural foods chef. And so they really wanted me to come on and help them, you know, deliver the science in a palatable way. So I got to learn how to pore over scientific journals and research and, you know, really learn how to dissect it. And I never went to medical school. That wouldn't ever be my thing. I'm not smart enough in that way to figure that out, but I can read through the journals and, you know, kind of figure out from these large epidemiological studies, like what has been around for, you know, long term and how people have learned to thrive off of food and nutrition, and just kind of capture that and deliver that in recipe form. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's awesome because I think it's part of the difficulty with being your own advocate. And Simran put in here, which I know she said to us, that most doctors only get like 15, 20 hours of nutrition education. Like most people can't and don't want to spend the time reading medical research and then saying, okay, how do I implement that into my daily life? Like it's such a huge service that you're doing. And it's the bridge, right? Like if you're going to have to be your own health advocate, which we all are all the time, especially with doctors who are really hyper specialized and it's not about your lifestyle, having that information that's like research backed, that's actionable and easy to understand and digest and then use is such an amazingly useful tool. So, you know, I think between you and Simran and Allison, the plan, and I'm going to just plug our event because why not, is to do one every other month. And we would love to hear from people who are listening now or watching later about what are the things that you're confused about? What do you want to understand more? What are some of the things that you are looking at out there now with and seeing information about, being like, this is confusing or this is conflicting, because we really want these events to serve you and be something useful.
Yeah, and it's really exciting to be joining the ranks with, I mean, Dr. Simran is, I mean, she's here now, but she's incredible. I mean, to have that kind of passion and be a doctor, it's just so, it's so rare. And, you know, I really just so deeply admire the work that she's doing. And she does incredible recipes too. I mean, I caught the last cooking video that she did, and it's amazing. It's very inspiring to be around people who want to make a difference. And you too, Kristen. I know that you're moderating our sessions, but when I first came across your page, I was blown away. I mean, like you just, you know, you found an issue, you want to help fix it, and you just put your energy into it. And that's such a beautiful thing and such a beautiful gift that you're giving people.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And I think, you know, to cheerlead for Simran too, it's, as some, like, I have two kids, they're home, it's COVID, everything kind of sucks. And I keep thinking, like, I don't have time. And then I see Simran and I'm like, okay, if she can meal prep and plan and to make a video of it, and like, it helps me to see other people do it and do it well and be excited about it. Cause then I'm like, okay, I'm going to try. You know, it's totally different to read a PDF or see an article and be like, oh yeah, that's cool. Or that recipe looks great. But making the time to do it. Oh, I'm getting a ping about our meeting after this. But yeah, you know, I think she's amazing, and Allison too. And I think the more information we can give people, because I am someone who is genuinely confused about it. I don't have training in wellness and health and nutrition, and I have Hashimoto syndrome, and like what the recommendations were for that were different than what they are for cancer prevention. And I'm like, okay, well, which thing matters more? How I feel every single day because of my thyroid, or thinking long term, you know, like, and how do I balance that, and whose information do I take? And, you know, it's really difficult.
Wow. I can't imagine that. I mean, that's like, yeah, I will just say the closest I've come to that is like I sometimes get symptoms of IBS, which that diet conflicts completely with, a colon cancer fighting diet. So you have to really figure out like, well, you have to pick your poison almost. But how do you deal with that, Kristen? Because have doctors been able to guide you better with that, or?
Well, I went to a conference, and there was a doctor, her name's Amy Myers, who sees people who've had all kinds of autoimmune issues and has really focused a lot on thyroid. And her recommendation is like no beans, no grains, like lots of things that if you were plant-based, you would need.
Yeah.
And so I end up eating a lot of lean protein and vegetables and fruit and staying away from grains, because I feel better day to day. But then I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be eating any meat. Maybe, you know, my protein, like I don't get protein from beans because I don't eat them. So it's just, you know, trying to sort of figure out what works. And also I love food. And so part of it for me, and I think a lot of people approaching wanting to make a positive lifestyle change is like, how does this fit into my personal culture, my family culture? You know, I don't want to make multiple meals for me and the kids. I want food to feel special and good and wonderful. And how to sort of bring all of that together takes a lot of effort.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Right after culinary school, I was doing personal chef work because it was quite rare, I think, to find a personal chef that was a natural foods chef. And it was, very high in demand in Southern California. If you can imagine the market,
Yeah.
it's a good market there. But I would work for these families that, they had, 3 and 4 kids, all with different dietary restrictions. And, you know, doing a meal prep for 1 week for them, I mean, it was extensive. Like, I can't imagine them trying to figure that out themselves. And then on top of that, you have to make it delicious, right?
Right.
So, yeah, but what was also interesting to me was seeing the stress. I mean, just the massive amounts of anxiety that the moms had in particular around food. Like, I remember it just kind of like was a light bulb, like, wow, all of the stress that they have, I wonder if that's undoing any of the, you know, positive aspects of eating well. And that's when I started to get really curious about stress management, because it just didn't seem super healthy. And they had other reasons why they were particularly stressed. You know, they had certain like health issues and stuff like that. But that's kind of my point is like when, you're already not 100% well, and then you're stressed about lifestyle factors, and then you're stressed, about your family's health. It's, to
Yeah.
me, I have a hard time wrapping my mind around that. It's really, really hard.
Yeah, because it's not siloed, right? Like all of those different things are part of the whole package. Like if you're stressed all the time, eating well is only going to get you so far. And I think
Right.
that, you're right. the IBS thing, I was thinking, I met this other founder. It's a man who has ulcerative colitis. And he was talking about developing some kind of platform for people who have IBS, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, because he figured out that the diet that his doctor was telling him to eat was not helping. And that eating, isn't it like all white foods? Are you supposed to eat like really plain white, like it, anyway, I'm not an expert in that either, but he was like really excited about, brilliantly, and he saw that we were doing this collaboration and emailed me. He's like, yeah, I just think it's really hard to know what the right thing to do is when some doctors tell you eat all white foods, don't eat salad, don't eat leafy greens, and then you're like, but also those are the things that are supposed to make me feel the best.
Well, and then to take it a step further, right? Like I've worked with folks who have done like the nutritional testing, like figuring out what they're allergic to or what gives
Right.
them, a reaction, like an inflammation response. And that, really that's getting into personalized, tailored nutrition right there, because there may be something going on underneath that you don't know is, triggering an inflammatory response in you. And that could be, I remember working with, he was a professional athlete. At the time he employed me was because he had gotten back a bunch of tests regarding inflammatory markers and inflammatory responses. And I'm telling you, like the things that his nutritionist had said no to were things like kale, things like spinach. For him, like that triggered a massive immune response in him, and he could not have that. So, we do read a lot of literature about some of these really, superfoods that all of us should be getting, but not really knowing, what's going on under the surface. And maybe that actually isn't so great for us after all, which, that's a whole other can of worms. That's something you probably want to talk to your nutritionist about if you're, really curious about diving deep into like the personalized nutrition aspect. But those kinds of tests are available to folks. You just have to find them.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the interesting thing that I go back to is there's these really big recommendations and we can all easily make some simple positive life changes. But if you really are dedicated to it, it is about personalizing it. It's about knowing what works for you. It's about knowing what works for your family, for whatever your hereditary risk profile is. It's so complex. So I think I'm excited to at least start unpacking it a little bit with you guys. I'll put information about the event in the caption from this chat. And we're going to figure out how to start sharing PDFs and recipes with everyone. And I love resharing what you and Simran are cooking and eating because it inspires me to buy better groceries.
Yeah, same. She had done a talk about plant-based protein, and she was telling me things like I didn't know about, like soy products. So it's really exciting to get this new information, stuff that I don't even know about. So it's great.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm excited to keep learning together and sharing. And where can people find you? Like, what's the best place? Is Instagram where you're most active? Or if people want to follow along more, how do they stay in touch with you, Lauren?
Yeah, I'm mostly on Instagram. I haven't branched out to other platforms yet, but yeah, you can always DM me. And I look forward to connecting with all of you guys.
Awesome. Well, hopefully a bunch of us will see you on Friday.
Great. All
Okay.
right.
Thanks for the
Take
time.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Kristen. Thank you.